welcome to the review for your first test on World War I. Alright, so this is going to be a pretty short video on a pretty long war. World War I lasted from 1914 to 1918, and I obviously can't cover all of that in one very short review video, but the primary purpose of this video is to get you ready for the exact material that's going to be on the test. So remember the main causes of World War I, literally main. M, militarism. A, alliances, and you can toss an extra A in there if you want. After alliances, you can do assassination. And then I, imperialism, and then N, nationalism. So militarism is basically the buildup of a military by a country, and it leads to other countries building up their military because you built up yours. And then you have alliances. All of the countries involved in this war had some form of weird alliance. Sometimes it's written down, sometimes it's more of a handshake agreement. But primarily when you look at countries like Germany and Austria-Hungary, and then Britain, Russia, France, Serbia, these countries are going to have these weird alliances that force them into war even when they didn't really want one. And then imperialism, basically the process of one country owning formally or basically owning another country and telling them what to do. The countries that are owned get very sick of this. And then nationalism, which is just extreme and aggressive pride in your country. Remember that nationalism and patriotism are very different. Patriotism is just a healthy pride in your country, whereas nationalism is like, my country's the best, and if you don't agree, we're going to fight about it. But remember that the biggest thing that starts World War I is the assassination of the Archduke of Austria-Hungary, Franz Ferdinand, by Gavrilo Princip. Now, in terms of history, Gavrilo Princip really is nobody. He was just a kid. He's 19. He doesn't live for very long after he does it. But the gunshot that he fires, assassinating the Archduke, is going to be the bullet that changes the world forever. So once Gavrilo Princip fires these bullets, he shoots the Archduke, he shoots the Archduke's wife. He's going to start a ball rolling down a hill. Really think of a snowball that just picks up steam and picks up steam until eventually we have a full-on war on our hands. And who's to blame for that exactly is a matter of debate. But in the end, the central powers in this war are going to be Germany, Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire. And at first, Italy, but they're going to switch in 1915. And then the big boys in the Allied powers are Great Britain, France, Russia, and eventually America. Remember that when this war gets started, Germany's military is so unbelievable that it's basically going to take 4 countries fighting them at the same time to beat them. And that's while Germany is having to send troops to help Austria-Hungary, because Austria-Hungary is not great at fighting. Germany has a plan though, because geographically they are pretty landlocked by some historic enemies, namely in this case Russia and France. So Germany's plan is to attack France while crossing through Belgium. They want to knock France out within a matter of weeks and then turn their attention to Russia. This is called the Schlieffen Plan. The only problem is that for Germany to get to France, they have to cross through Belgium, and Belgium has a big brother named Great Britain, who at this time is also one of the greatest militaries in the world, particularly on the ocean. So when Germany attacks France, going through Belgium, Great Britain enters the war, and we have ourselves a full-on battle that is going to rage from 1914 to around 1917 in a relatively unchanged pattern. Trench warfare takes over, particularly on the Western Front. There will be offensives where one side sends troops toward the other side, and a whole lot of people die. It descends into a stalemate with everybody going back to their trench. Because this war is going to see the development of the machine gun, not really the invention of it, but the fact that both sides have it, everybody is using it, means a lot of people are going to die. And old school generals are going to have to change their tactics, because at first they're basically fighting the same wars that Napoleon fought, or people in the early 1800s, or the American Civil War. They're fighting it very much the same way. They're not fighting a modern war with modern weapons. They're basically trying to fight it the old way, and a lot of their men are dying because of it. So notably, America is not in this war yet. President Woodrow Wilson is trying to keep America out, but he's also trying to keep his thumb on the pulse of the war. And when Germany invades Belgium, that kind of takes them out of the running for a side that America might join. But another thing that Germany does to really get on America's bad side, and particularly on the American people's bad side, is they have a new invention called a U-boat, which is for all intents and purposes an early submarine, and a ship called the Lusitania that wasn't an American ship. It was a British ship that actually was holding British war goods, but it had Americans on it. A little over 100 Americans die on this ship when Germany torpedoes the ship. Now, this is 1915. America is not going to enter the war because of the Lusitania, but it does show us yet again, just like Belgium, we are not going to get in the war on the side of the Germans. And then in 1917, by the way, is a big year. There are going to be some major battles with millions of deaths from 1914 to 1916, but 1917 is the year that the war really starts to shift against the Germans. In 1917, the Germans send a telegram to Mexico called the Zimmerman telegram, and in it, it says that if Mexico invades America to sort of tie them up at home and keep them out of the war, that Germany will give Mexico back the land that they lost to America in the 1800s, namely Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico. The only problem is that the British intercept this because they are awesome at breaking codes and awesome at what we would call kind of early espionage, code breaking, things like that. They give this message to Woodrow Wilson, the American people find out about it, and America enters the war. Now, right around the time that America is entering the war, Russia is leaving it because Russia has had all kinds of problems at home. The Tsar of Russia, who really never loved that job anyways, he kind of came into it because it was his family duty, it was his lineage. He is overthrown by a revolution in his own country. Eventually, a guy named Vladimir Lenin is going to step in, and Russia is going to become communist. Russia is going to negotiate a separate peace with the Germans, and Russia is out. But fortunately for the Allied powers, Britain and France, who have been fighting this war, they've been ground down to almost nothing now while fighting the Germans. America is now in the war, and America is going to push the war effort over the top. Now, of course, I'm skipping a whole lot there. There are countless battles. There are countless important things that we need to discuss. We haven't even discussed anything except the Western Front yet, but remember, I'm trying to keep this really, really narrow on what our test is going to be. Eventually, the war is going to start to draw to a close, and peace negotiations are going to begin. Woodrow Wilson, America's president at the time, says that there has to be peace without victory. Basically, what he's saying is that it can't be a peace where one side gets sort of embarrassed on the world stage. He says that if that happens, that side is just going to be really, they're going to be really angry, the people are going to want to fight back, and that eventually that side will build up again. Now, unfortunately for Germany, Great Britain and France are really not in a very forgiving mood. So the Treaty of Versailles gets signed, Germany has no choice in the matter, and eventually, basically what's going to happen is that Germany is going to have to pay for the entire war, they're going to have to accept guilt for the entire war, as well as they're going to have to cut their military down to basically nothing, they're going to have to give up a whole bunch of land, and the German people are humiliated. Now, this is going to bring a time of great prosperity for the Americas. We call it the Roaring 20s because we had loaned a bunch of money to Britain and France, and we won the war, so we're starting to make some of that money back. But Germany is going to be crippled by this. And so it's going to create a power vacuum. There's going to be all kinds of infighting in Germany in the 20s. It's going to create a power vacuum for a guy named Adolf Hitler to step in and say, no, we didn't lose the war. Remember, we were the best military. We got stabbed in the back. But hold on for that because that's going to be World War II.